Alright, so for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll be using this chat app over here, which I've previously made. You can clone this app by clicking on the link in the video description down below. If you're also interested in learning how to make this app from scratch, I actually have a 20-part series where I teach you exactly how to make a chat app, which you can click on this top right hand corner and it will bring you to that series. So if you have cloned the base version of the chat app over here, you can see that we have a lot of errors over here. 59 errors, that's a lot. Most of these errors are actually because we have not linked our Supabase table over here, since we don't have one just yet. So in your Supabase dashboard, we'll first want to create a new table. And then we'll just create the new project. Alright, so once our project has finished setting up, we will create our tables that we need. So we'll go into Table Editor and we'll click on New Table. So the first table that we actually want to create is the chats table. So we'll just name it chats like such. And we also need some columns. So the first column that we need is the chat name column. So it'll be chat underscore name. Make sure that the name is exactly the same. And it will be of type text. Next is the chat description and followed by the chat image. So it'll be chat description. It'll be of type text as well. And next is the chat image underscore image. It will also be of type text. Following that, it will be chat members, which is an array of text. So let's just add a column called chat members. And this time it will be of type text, but we have to go to this gear icon over here and we have to check this define as array option to be on. Following the chat members will be the last message, which will have type text. So last underscore message. And after that, it will be last message time, which is a timestamp TZ. So last message underscore time, which will be of type timestamp TZ. And lastly is the isChatGroup boolean variable. So it'll be of type bool. And let me just quickly edit this column to check. So the default value here is false. Alright, so once you have implemented all the columns, let's just click on save. And we should have 9 columns in our chats table. Oh, and one more thing that I forgot to do is to disable role level security for this chats table. So we'll just go and edit our table and we'll check this enable role level security to be off. Then we'll click on save. And now our chats table is accessible by everyone. So the next table that we need is our messages table. So we'll just go ahead and create a new table by clicking on this new table button and we'll name it messages. For this messages table, let's go ahead and see what this table has. So it has all of these columns. So let's go and implement it now. But first we need to remember to disable role level security and we'll add the columns that we need. So the first column that we need is the message underscore text column, which will be of type text. The next one that we need is the sender ID, which is a UUID. So sender ID, which will be of type UUID. Next, it will be the recipient ID, which is an int8. So make sure to spell it correctly. Next, it will be the image path. So img underscore path. And last is the is underscore image boolean variable. And this will have a default value of false. So let's click on save. And that's our messages table done. The next table that we need is our user data table. So this user data table has some of these columns over here. So we'll name it user underscore data. And we actually want to remove the creator at as well as the ID columns. The first column that we need is the UID. So it's UID. The type will be of type UUID. And this will be the primary key of the table. Next is the phone number. Which will be of type text. And next will be the name, which will also be of type text. Following that is the bio, which will also be of type text. And lastly will be the profile image underscore path. So profile underscore img underscore path. Now for this FCM token column, this will be implemented later when we go through the tutorial. So I'll just skip this for now. So these are all the columns that we need. I'll just click on save. And now we have our user data table. And I think I also forgot to disable row level security. So let's quickly do that right now. Alright, nice. So that should be all the tables that we need before we are able to go through the tutorial. Now, one last thing that we need to do is that we have to enable real-time database for our messages table. So we go to our messages table over here, and in this top right hand corner, we'll click on real-time, and we want to enable real-time. We can check that it's enabled by going to databases, and you can see that under the messages table, real-time is enabled. So the last thing that we have to do is that we have to actually link this Supabase project to our FlutterFlow project. So we'll go to project settings, and we want to go to API under configuration, and we want to copy our project URL. We want to go to settings and integrations in Supabase, and under integrations we'll go to Supabase, and we'll copy and paste our project URL under API URL. We also want to copy this anon public key and paste it in the anon key over here in FlutterFlow. Then once we get schema, we should see that all of our errors are gone. We are left with one more error, which is just the check for the custom function. So we can just click on that and it'll just check our custom function. After it's done checking, you should see that you have no more errors left, and now you are able to follow along with the push notification tutorial as well. Let's now get into the push notification feature. So the first step that we have to do is we have to create some tables in our Supabase project, namely a notifications table, which will hold all of our notifications, including the primary key of the user ID who sent it, the user ID field over here, which is the UID of the user that we want to send the push notification to, and last but not least is the body over here, which will be the text inside our notification. Alright, so let's just create the notifications table first. We'll go into our Supabase table editor, we'll click on create new table, we'll name it notifications. For this primary key over here, we'll leave the name as ID, but we'll change the type to UUID. We also want to add a new column of user ID. And this will also be of type UUID. This, remember, will be the user ID of the person we are sending the push notification to. Last but not least will be the body, which will be of type text. We can click on save. And now we have our notifications table. But one more thing that I forgot to do was to disable row level security so that we can have access, we can have read-write access to our notifications table. Alright, the next table that we need to create is the profiles table. This is actually just an extension of a user data table. So as you can see, if you already have some user data table in your Supabase project like I have over here, what we need to do is we just need to add this column over here, which is FCM token. So we need this additional column to store the unique FCM token, which is Firebase Cloud Messaging token, so that we are able to actually send the push notification to that user. So in my user data table, I'll just add a new column, and I'll name this column FCM token. The type will be of type text, and the default value will be null. Okay, great, so that's all the tables that we need. Now the next step is actually to set up the Supabase CLI, and we need the Supabase CLI to be able to develop our edge functions locally, and then the CLI will enable us to upload it to our Supabase project. I have this link over here which I'll also put down in the video description, so you can go to this, and it should bring you to this documentation over here. So for me, I'm on a Windows system, so I will go to this Windows instructions over here. Now what I want to do is I want to open Windows PowerShell. And now what I want to do is I want to copy and paste these commands. Paste. But when you try to copy and paste it, you can see that the term scoop is not recognized. So this occurs because we actually haven't downloaded scoop yet. So I can click on scoop here. And now there are some instructions which we can just copy from to download scoop. And we'll just paste it here. You can wait for a while and it should download scoop to our system. We can first go back to our Supabase documentation over here while we wait for the download. Alright, so once scoop was installed successfully, we can now copy and paste these instructions. And you can see that there are no more errors over here, and the Supabase bucket has been added successfully. Now we can scroll down and continue following all the instructions. So scoop update Supabase. And you don't need to follow this because we don't want to start a new Supabase instance. Next, we have to download Docker Desktop. So we can click on this link once again. We can scroll down, and under Install Docker Desktop, we want to choose your OS system that you're on. For me, it's Windows, so I'll click on this. And I'll download this Docker Desktop for Windows x86_64. You can see that the download has started and has finished. So once the download has finished, I'll go to my File Explorer, and I'll open the Docker Desktop installer. And we'll wait for it to install. So click on OK. Okay, so once the installation has finished, we can just press on close. Alright, so after you have restarted your computer, you should see this window over here, and we'll just click on finish. And we'll just allow changes for this app. We can skip this, and then we'll skip this as well. We'll just skip everything. And now you should have your Docker engine over here. You can see that starting, and but now we have to change and configure some of the settings in our Docker engine. So we can go over to this gear icon over here, and we have to wait for it to load for a while. Once it's loaded though, we can go on and configure these settings over here. So we want to click on exposing daemon. And we also want to check this add the Docker internal names to the host file. So we click on apply and then restart. Then this also comes up, so we'll just press on start service. Then we'll click on yes. Then it should automatically apply and restart our Docker engine. And you can see now that our Docker engine is running properly. So yep, now that Docker has been installed in our system, we can continue. So now we will actually create the Supabase project directory for us to edit and create the edge function locally. So we want to open our PowerShell, and we want to go into a folder where we can create our Supabase project locally. So what I'll do is I'll open my File Explorer, and under Desktop, I'll just create a new folder here. And I'll just name this folder Supabase. You can name it anything you want. And now with this Supabase folder, I will want to copy this path over here. Then I will type in cd and I'll paste the path. And now you can see that the path has been replaced with this over here. So now we are currently in this desktop folder. But to go into the Supabase folder, I must change directory once more. That's what cd means. And I'll type in Supabase. And now I'm in the Supabase folder that I just created. So the next command that we have to run over here is the supabase init command. So I'll just copy this command and I'll run it over here. And it should create a new Supabase directory. So over here it says generate VS Code settings for Dino. We'll just type in yes. So now we've created our Supabase directory. You can go and check inside your Supabase folder. There should be a Supabase folder as well over here. Alright, so the next step is to actually create our Supabase Edge function. So I have this link over here, which I'll also link in the video description down below. You can click on it, and it should bring you to this documentation on how to use Firebase Cloud Messaging to send push notifications. So we scroll down over here, and you can see we already did this step, which is to initialize a Supabase project. So now we want to actually create the push function. So we'll copy this function over here, and this creates a new function called push inside our Supabase folder. So now we want to open VS Code, and the short form command to do that is just code dot. And this will open VS Code inside a window. You can see that we have our Supabase project over here. Under the functions file, we have a push directory with an index.ts file. So an informational dialog will also pop up over here of do you want to install the recommended Dino extensions. We'll press on install. And then it will install it for us, and it should be good. We can go back to our index.ts function. So now what we want to do is we want to copy all of this code over here in the Supabase documentation, and we'll paste and replace all of this inside our index.ts file. So remember to save the file by using the keyboard shortcut Ctrl S on Windows, and this will actually be our edge function to allow us to send push notifications. Now this file is quite complicated, but I'll try my best to break it down and in the simplest way possible. So what these lines of code over here does is that when our Supabase edge function is called, it will grab our FCM token of the user that we want to send the notification to, and it'll store it in this FCM token variable. Now this FCM token is important because we need it when we are sending push notifications through Firebase Cloud Messaging. So next, what we want to do is we want to go over here and actually call the Firebase Cloud Messaging API to send the push notification to us. And you can see that the FCM token over here is used and is passed into the API because this is important in identifying the user that we want to send it to. And after we call the Firebase Cloud Messaging API, we want to get back a response. And we want to check the response status so that we know whether the push notification was successfully sent or not. So that's a very brief rundown of what this entire file is doing. So now that we have our edge function, the next step is to set up Firebase Cloud Messaging. So to do that, we actually need a Firebase project. So we want to go back to our FlutterFlow project. Under Settings and Integrations, we'll go under Project Setup Firebase. And we want to create a new Firebase project. The project name can be anything you want, but ideally it should be the same name as your FlutterFlow project. And for the Firebase region, I'll just choose the one closest to me, Singapore. Now we have to sign into our Google account, and it'll take some time to automatically link and configure our Firebase project for us. Okay, so after a few minutes, you should see that the Firebase project has been successfully created. Now you can just open this Firebase project by clicking on this button over here, and it will open our Firebase console. So nice, our new Firebase project has been successfully created. So now what we have to do is we have to actually give Supabase permissions to use our Firebase project. So we want to go into this settings icon over here, and you want to click on project settings. Then we want to go to service accounts, give it a while to load, and under Firebase admin SDK we want to select node.js, and we want to generate a new private key. This should trigger a download file, and if we check our downloads, you can see that a new file has been added into our downloads. What we want to do is we want to cut this file, and we want to go back to our Supabase project. Under functions, we want to paste that file right over here. And then we also have to rename this file to service-account.json. Make sure that the name is exactly the same as this, if not it'll cause some errors later. So we can close our file explorer. So we can open our VS Code once more, and under the functions file we can see that we have a new file over here called service-account.json. Right, very nice. So the next step is actually to deploy our edge function to our Supabase project so that we can actually use our edge function. So to be able to deploy our Supabase edge function, we want to go back into our VS Code, and we want to open the terminal, which you can click on this terminal option over here, and we can select new terminal. Then we want to type in the command Supabase link. You can see that we have an error over here, which is that we are not logged into our Supabase project just yet. So first we have to log into our Supabase account. So we'll type in Supabase login. You can press enter to open the browser and automatically authorize us. So now we have successfully logged into our Supabase account. You can see that we are logged in over here. So now we can type Supabase link to link our project. So then after that, it'll list all of your projects over here, and you can use the up and down arrow keys to choose the project that you want to deploy your edge function to. So in this case, it will be chat app, and I'll choose that project. For the database password, you can just leave it as blank to skip, and we'll just press enter. For this warning, you can just ignore it, but from this line over here, we have finished linking our Supabase project successfully. So the next step to do is to actually deploy the function to our project. So I'll just copy and paste this function over here, and I'll paste that command inside. And you can see that it's bundling the push function. And after some time, we should be able to successfully upload our push function, our Supabase edge function. So just give it a while, and it is deploying the function. And great, our function has successfully been deployed. So we can close out of our VS Code editor, we can go back to our Supabase project, and we can check under edge functions to see that our edge function has indeed been successfully deployed. So that is amazing. Now the next step is to create a database webhook, which acts as sort of a trigger so that whenever a new row is inserted into our notifications table, we can call our Supabase edge function to send that push notification. So to do that, we'll go under database, and under platform, we'll choose webhooks, and we'll enable webhooks, and we want to create a new hook. For the name of the webhook, you can just give it as push notification. Make sure not to use any spaces or white spaces. And for the table over here, we want to choose our notifications table, which is under public and notifications. For the event, it'll be on insert event. And for the type of webhook, since we're calling a Supabase edge function, we'll click on this option. The method will be post, and the edge function that we want to trigger is our push edge function that we just created. So we can just click on create webhook, and now we have successfully created our push notification webhook. Alright, so the next step now is to retrieve the FCM token of the currently authenticated user in the FlutterFlow project and store this token inside our Supabase table. So we have to go to a FlutterFlow app, and we have to add some custom code for this function. But before we add the custom code, we actually have to go into our app values and we have to create a new app state variable. We'll call this FCM token, and this variable will be used to store our user's FCM token. So we create an app state variable over here. Now we can go over to our custom code and we can add a new action. And the custom code for this action can be found with this link to my GitHub, which I've also put down in the video description. So redirecting to this GitHub, you should be redirected to this initialize messaging.dart file. So I'll just copy and paste everything over here. And for the action name, I also name it the same name as this function name over here. And this action actually requires some pub/spec dependencies. The first one is called Firebase underscore messaging. And the second dependency is called awesome underscore notifications. So once we have these two dependencies typed out, we'll click on this button to refresh our code editor. And then we'll save our action over here. Okay, great. So now that we have a way to call Firebase messaging and retrieve the currently authenticated user's FCM token, and it'll automatically store it in our app state variable over here. Alright, so this custom action may be very long and may look very long, but I'll try my best to break it down to you. So what this block of code over here does is that it requests permissions from the user to be able to receive push notifications. Because some users may not want to receive push notifications on their app. And these blocks of code over here basically format the notifications in a nice way so that it appears professional to the user. Alright, so that's basically the code. Now we have to go into our main.dart file, and under final actions we have to call our initialize messaging custom action that we created just now, so that whenever the app loads, we are trying to grab the user's FCM token so that we can actually send the user their push notification. Hello, future me here. So it turns out that we actually forgot to save the initialize messaging custom action inside our main.dart file, as over here in the final actions column over here there's nothing. So to do that, let's just add our initialize messaging function really quickly again, and make sure that you press on the save button so that it actually saves in the main.dart file. Alright, back to you. Now one more setting that we have to configure in FlutterFlow. We have to go to settings and configuration, and we have to go to permissions. And over here you can see that there's a notifications permission. We have to enable that, and we can type a permission message, for example, needed for push notifications. This is important to toggle on. So now that we have added the custom action to retrieve the FCM token and store it inside our app state variable, we actually have to store it inside our Supabase database of the user data table under the FCM token column as well. So that will be done in our home page, and we'll go to the top level here. Whenever the page is loaded, we want to update our Supabase table. We want to update our user data table. For matching rows, we will select where the UID is equal to our authenticated user's user ID. For the fields that we want to set the FCM token field, and this value will be our app state FCM token. So now whenever the user logs into the app, it will update their FCM token as well. So the last step is actually to trigger the push notification. For a chat app, we want to send a push notification to the user whenever a new message is sent. So we can go to our chat page over here, and whenever a user sends a message, we can open the action flow editor. Whenever the user sends a new message, we want to notify the user receiving the message. So after a new message has been inserted, we want to add a new action, and we want to search for insert and Supabase insert row. For the table, it will be the notifications table, And for the fields, we want to set the ID field to our authenticated user's user ID. For the created add field, we'll leave it blank. And now for the fields, we want to set our fields over here. For the ID field, it will be the authenticated user's user ID. We don't need the created add field. And for the user ID field, which is the recipient user, we can get the user ID from our chat members list over here. For example, under chats, you can see that I have this chat members list with all the users included inside the chat. But if we go over to our chats table over here in Supabase, we can see that some chats contain more than 2 members. So it not only contains one member who is the one sending the message, but it contains also 2 or more other members who we also want to send the push notifications to. So we cannot just call a single action over here, because this we can only insert a single row with this action. So we want to delete this action. And instead what we want to do is we want to add a loop. We want to be able to loop over this chat members list, excluding the user who sent the message. And for each of those members, we want to insert a row inside the notifications table to send them each a push notification. So we need to do that via a loop. So for the loop, we want to add a single condition. But in order to loop over those members, we first have to create some counter variable, page state variable, to be able to iterate over the loop. So under the chat page, I want to go under local page state variable, and I'll just create a counter page state variable with type integer. And the initial field value will be 0. So now going back into this send message icon, we can now create the condition for our loop. So it will be a single condition, and the loop will run whenever the counter page state variable is less than the length of our chat members list, excluding the current user's user ID. So how we can do that is we can select chat members list, and then we can filter list items. The filter condition is a single condition, and we can filter the items for when the item in list is not equal to our authenticated user's user ID. So basically this just filters the list and removes the current user who sent the message. Now we want to select number of items. So basically now we have the total number of users that we want to send a push notification to, and our counter will loop over this. And now we want to select the insert row Supabase action. For the table, it will be notifications, and we want to select and add these fields. For the ID, it will be the authenticated user's user ID. So authenticated user's user ID. For created app, we don't need that. For the recipient user ID, now we can go to chat members list, and we can select the item and index. We select specific index, and now for the index, we can pass our page state counter parameter. So we can click on confirm. For the text body of the notification, the value we can pass it as our widget state and whatever the user has typed in the text field. So last but not least, within the loop itself, after we insert a row in the notifications table, we have to update our counter and increase our counter variable by 1. So we'll select state, update page state. We choose the counter variable that we created just now. For the update type, we'll just select increment/decrement, and we'll choose the increment value to be 1. So now this increases the value of the counter by 1 whenever we are looping over the items. Hello, future me here once more. So I just realized that there's also another problem with the looping algorithm over here. So you can see that the counter was initially set to 0, and we increase the counter every time we go through this loop with this update page state action. However, the counter was actually never reset to 0 after the whole action chain ends. So to do that, we'll just add a new action right at the bottom over here, and we'll set page state, update page state. We'll update our counter page state variable, and we'll set the value to be 0. Or alternatively, we can also set the update type to reset value. That works as well, since we define a default value for the counter to be a default value of 0. So it just resets the counter to 0 after the whole action chain is done. So I realized that there was an error in the Supabase notifications table. So actually, currently our Supabase table takes this ID field to be the primary key. However, this ID field is the sender user's ID, the sender of the push notification. However, if this column is the primary key, then the user can only send one push notification, because the sender ID in this column cannot be replicated among other rows. So to fix this, let's first remove this row. So let's actually go ahead and just delete this table over here. And once that notifications table is deleted, let's just create a new notifications table. We'll disable row level security, and this time we'll leave the ID to be of type int8 and the primary key. Now we want to add the sender ID, which will be of type UUID, and we also want to add the recipient ID, which will also be of type UUID. And now it'll be the body text, which is the body of the message. It'll be of type text. So we save that. And now there shouldn't be any problems with the primary key of this table. So the same user will be able to send multiple push notifications to other users as well. But because we changed our notifications table in our Supabase database, we just have to go back to FlutterFlow, and we have to go to Settings and Integrations. Under Supabase, we have to get Schema once more. And because we changed, or rather we added one more column, we'll have some errors over here. So for this insert row action, we no longer want the ID. Instead, we want to set the sender ID, and this will be the authenticated user's user ID. For this field, it was the recipient field, and we'll set this as our chat members item at index, and the specific index will be at the index of our page state counter, and the body will remain the same. So that looks like there's one more error, which is just for checking the custom function. Okay, so because we changed how our notifications table is set up in our Supabase database, we also have to go back to VS Code, and we have to change this interface notification class over here. So the ID will no longer be of type string, it will be of type int. Then we have to add a sender ID field, which will be of type string. And this user ID is no longer user ID, instead it's recipient ID. Make sure that the spelling is exactly the same as the one here. And the body will remain the same. So I also realized that there was a problem with one of the tables over here. So this line of code is actually wrong, as it's getting the FCM token from a profiles table. However, in our app, our profiles table, the one which stores the user's FCM token, is actually called user data. So we have to go ahead and change that. So instead of profiles, is user underscore data. So remember to save that, and then we'll have to push our notification up to Supabase again. So it'll just be this function, which is the one that we used previously as well. And if you get this error over here, it's because we didn't open Docker Desktop. So let's just quickly run Docker Desktop. So we'll wait for it to run, and once it's running, we should be able to go ahead and push our notification up. So yeah, it's running now. So let's try the command once more. Supabase function deploy push is bundling a function. And now it should automatically update our function in Supabase. So we can give that a quick check. Under edge functions, you can see that now we have 2 deployments instead of 1, and it was last updated a few seconds ago. Alright, so one important thing to note is that when we deleted our notifications table and created a new notifications table, we actually deleted our webhook over here. Because we deleted the notification table, so it deleted the webhook. So we actually have to go ahead and create a new webhook. So we have to recreate the webhook. We can just name it push notification. Remember not to add any spaces. For the table, it will be public notifications. For the event, it will be insert. For the type of webhook, it will be Supabase edge function. And the method will be post, and we'll all leave this as it is for now. Then we can create the webhook. And now we should have the webhook created. Alright, so that's basically it. That's everything that we need to do to implement push notifications inside our FlutterFlow apps. So we can close out of this, and now we can actually go ahead and try testing out our app. But unfortunately, we will actually need an emulator to be able to test out this function. So if you don't know what an emulator is, it's basically a virtual replica of either an Android or iOS phone on your computer system itself. So we cannot actually test it out on test mode. We'll need an Android emulator to test this out. If you're interested in learning how to install an Android emulator on your laptop or computer, do leave it down in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to make a video about it. But for now, I'll just test it out on my own Android emulator. Alright, so I have my 2 Android emulators open here, and I've downloaded the chat app APK on both of them. So let's try opening the app on one of them first. And we can see that when we first download the app and we first open the app, there's a notification pop up over here, which asks us if we want to allow chat app to send us notifications. So this is important, and we must press allow so that the app actually has permissions to send us push notifications. So let me just sign in with one of my accounts over here. And for this account, I'm Apple. So let's open the chat app on the other emulator. And the same pop-up shows up. So remember to click allow. And I'll sign into my other account, test2@gmail.com. So this account is Amazon. So let's go to the Amazon chat. And let's try typing something. Let's try sending this message. So unfortunately, it looks like no notification was sent. So that probably means that there's something wrong with our edge function itself. So we can actually try to debug this issue by going back to our Supabase dashboard, and we can go back to our edge functions. We can click on our edge function, and we can go to invocations over here. We can check our timestamp where we send the message, and these are not it. So if it doesn't appear on invocations, we can go to logs, and this contains a full history of when our edge functions were called. So if we go over here at 4:30, you can see that there was actually an error with our edge function, and the error is detailed over here. So there was a type error where we cannot read properties of now, reading FCM token. So this means that there was some problem with getting our FCM token from our user data table. So we can go back to our VS Code, and we can try to debug this problem. So since we couldn't retrieve our FCM token from our Supabase table correctly, we can look into this block of code, which is what it was supposed to do. We can see that it is getting the FCM token from our user data table. So that is correct, since we can check the names FCM token and user data table. The names are correctly spelled. So there's nothing wrong with that. But then we see a problem over here, because this filter is trying to filter for the ID column. In fact, our user data table does not have an ID column. It has a UID column. So we actually have to change this to UID. And it's also trying to filter for where the UID column is equal to the payload.record.userid. However, we actually changed from user ID to recipient ID over here. So the columns no longer match. So instead of user ID now, we actually wanted to name it recipient ID instead. And that was why we couldn't get the FCM token from our Supabase database. So we'll try to save this file once more, Ctrl S, and let's try deploying it and updating it once again. So it has been successfully deployed. Let's check our Supabase Edge functions. And nice, we have a new deployment a few seconds ago. So now that a new Edge function has been deployed, let's try sending another message. Unfortunate. Ah, yes, okay, very nice. So you can see that a new notification actually pops up over here now. And if we try to see that notification, oops, yep, so it was a notification from Supabase with the message, "I really hope this works now," and that was sent by this user over here. So yes, it works. Finally, we have push notifications. So if I try to go back into the Flutter app, and let's try sending it now to the other phone. If we try sending a message from this device instead, we should see the notification pop up on this other device. So the message was sent. However, the notification popped up on this device. So let's go back into our Supabase table under notifications and see what's actually going wrong. If we see that the new row has been inserted in our notifications table, the sender ID is correct, but the recipient ID is wrong over here. So that tells us that there's a problem when inserting our notifications row. So we go back into our FlutterFlow dashboard and we open the send icon and we go into the action that inserts the row into notifications. We click specifically on recipient ID and the problem lies over here. This is because we forgot to filter the chat members list first to remove the currently authenticated user before we take the item at the index. So actually, this should be filter list items where a single condition of the first value is where the item in list is not equal to our authenticated user's user ID. And then only after we filter the list, then we can take the item at index, the specific index, and the index at our page state variable, our counter page state variable. So now if we save this, now it should work properly. But however, since we downloaded the APK, we have to download the APK again and then install it on both emulators. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I re-downloaded the APKs and I installed them back into the emulators. So now let's exit out of this app in this emulator and let's try typing something. So you can see that there's actually a new push notification that showed up, which is a notification from Supabase with the message, "Hello, yes, it worked." If we go into a FlutterFlow app, you can see that there's also a little notification icon over here. So if we click onto it, then you can see that the message was sent over here. Alright, so yes, that wraps it up for today's video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you are now able to implement push notifications into your FlutterFlow apps as well. And I hope that you also picked up some skills on how to debug errors efficiently with Supabase and FlutterFlow. So once again, if you're interested in learning how to create a chat app like this from scratch, please click on this video, which will bring you to a playlist on how exactly I created this chat app. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.